Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are continuing our little tutorial of Magic the Gathering. Last time we spoke in regards to creatures and combat amongst them. Today we're going to talk a little off the track a bit, but we're going to speak about Planeswalkers and then specialty cards, foil cards. So let's do that. First, let's talk about specialty cards, foil cards. For a long time, Magic has, every so often, every few packs, foil card. They do increase the value a little bit. I think it's 5, 10 cents, something like that. But, yeah. If you play a lot of tournaments, sanctioned tournaments, like at your card shop or anything, they'll also give us prizes, some of the foil cards. You see how it kind of shimmers there. This is one I got at a recent tournament here on Saturday, where we had a booster draft for War of the Spark, which was the most previous set. And I think they're getting ready to do a brand new set coming up, so. But yeah, this is another one I got at the booster draft. This one you can see, not only is it foil, but in the text you have the symbol. This particular symbol is the symbol for War of the Spark, which normally you would see on the side, but where this is a specialty card. This one's a little bit different too. This is a sanction card, and it says over the text, DCI. This is Marisi's Twin Claws. But if you play and you win some, you can get foil. Sometimes they give them as participation. And I've been playing on and off for years. I still suck, but I like to play. And I've been playing since around 4th edition Ice Age, because the booster of Ice Age was my first tournament. And people were getting the Polar Kraken, and it was like, wow. You know, that was the big beast. Now you see something like a Polar Kraken, and you're like, really? Really? Casting cost is just too high. Not to mention the cumulative upkeep, which isn't too really a thing I think they do anymore, is upkeep. But it's still around. You go through when you go through each step. Untap, upkeep, draw, phase, let's see, main phase 1, battle, main phase 2, discard, end phase. Which should be the basic idea of your turn when you're playing Magic. But we'll get further over that as we go. The other thing I want to talk about, the foil were just an example. Other thing I want to talk about is Planeswalkers. The beginning of Magic, they didn't have such things as Planeswalkers. They were introduced later in the series, about 2011 or 12. I think somewhere around there. Because for a long time, yeah, you just didn't have Planeswalkers. But the idea is they're like having a second player with you. Each Planeswalker has abilities, has a certain number of points they start out with. Now, each one of their abilities will take points away from that total or add to it. However, like a player, they can be attacked directly. So, instead of attacking your normal opponent, you can attack their Planeswalker. It's one of the few things you can really direct your attacks towards. They can still block for their Planeswalker, but it's one of the few cards you can direct an attack towards. But to give you an example, we have a few different ones here. Tezzeret the Seeker. Like I said, they have their mana costs to bring out. As you can see in the middle, it says Planeswalker. And then at the bottom, you see he's got a total of 4. His first ability, you can add 1 to his total and untap up to 2 target artifacts. You can subtract X, so say 2. So you would search your library for an artifact card with a converted mana cost of 2 or less and put it onto the battlefield. You could also go straight for 4. Shuffle your library. And then, of course, the bottom one, remove 5, which he doesn't start out with 5. Artifacts you control become 5/5 artifact creatures until end of turn. Tezzeret the Seeker. As examples, I've also got Elspeth, the Knight Errant, I've got, this is a classic one, when they first introduced Planeswalkers, Garruk Wildspeaker. Then another classic one, Liliana Bess. And a version of another classic one, Chandra Nalar. And then I have some from the recent War of the Spark booster draft I was in. Arlen, Voice of the Pack. Tamio, Collector of Tales. And then Saheeli, Sublime Artificer. But these are some examples of different Planeswalkers. Now, as I said, you can directly attack Planeswalkers. Now, with Magic, you can't specifically attack any creature, but you can attack your opponent, which they can still have creatures blocked for them. And it's the same with the Planeswalker. You can directly attack the Planeswalker, but they can have creatures blocked for the Planeswalker. Now, in the more recent Planeswalkers here, they only have like one or two abilities. Plus, they have static abilities. Like with Saheeli here, Sublime Artificer, she only has the one ability, but her static ability, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So it's great for artifact decks. She starts out with 5 points, but you can subtract 2, so you can't add any points to it, but you can subtract it. Target artifact you control becomes a copy of another target artifact or creature you control until end of turn, except it's an artifact in addition to the other types. And of course, whenever they use up that number, they're gone. So she could use her ability twice. Tamio has a static ability. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents. Now, she has 5 to begin with, but she has an ability to add and subtract. The add, choose a non-land card name, then reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all cards with the chosen name from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So that doesn't guarantee it grows very well, but her second ability, -3, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So the first ability, you could search your library, but the second ability, you could still search your graveyard. And then, of course, I've got Arlen, Voice of the Pack. And like I said, she's got a static ability as well. Each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it. And her only ability is -2, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. And she has a 7, so that ability could be used 3 times. And were there 2/2s, they'd come onto the field with a 1/1 counter on them, automatic 3/3s. Let's look at some of the older ones, though. Chandra Nalar starts with 6. She has a +1, -X, and -8. Now, her +1, deal 1 damage to target player. So it doesn't target creatures, but your opponent, paint, 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 you can keep smacking them for a point. You could smack yourself for a point. I don't know why you'd want to, though. Her -X ability deals X damage to target creature. So the first ability is a little plinking ability for 1 point against target player. But the second ability, X damage against target creature. The last ability, -8, target Chandra Nalar deals 10 damage to target player and each creature he or she controls. Which, that one's devastating. Each player starts out with 20 life. And so that's an automatic 10 damage to that player, plus 10 damage to any creature. It's rare to see 10/10s, unless you have a just growth deck. Let's look at Liliana Vess. Now, she starts out with 5. Her add 1 ability, target player discards a card. So you can point it at yourself or at your opponent and make them just take one out of their hand and put it in the graveyard. Her next ability is a -2, which is search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. So you can kind of prep your deck, which is a pretty good ability. And then her last one is a -8. Put all creature cards in all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. That means all your creatures and all your opponent's creatures. Yeah. That's a devastating card as well. But it's -8, so she starts out with 5. You've got to use the discard at least 3 times. Let's look at Garruk the Wild Speaker. He's only 4 to come out, and he starts out with 3 points. He has a +1 ability to untap 2 target lands, which is a pretty good ability. His second ability is a -1 ability to put a 3/3 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. So you can pump your army up fairly quick. And his last one is only a -4, so he starts out with 3, You untap your lands once, and the very next turn, boom. So that last ability, creatures you control get a +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. Now, you think about this. His -1 ability is put a 3/3 creature into play. If you have that, and then you use his last ability, all of a sudden that 3/3 for one turn becomes a 6/6 with trample. Which trample means if it's blocked by a 1/1, it only stops one amount of damage, and the rest goes through to your opponent. Trample is a very powerful ability. Elspeth, Knight Errant. Her casting cost looks like a 2 or a 3. I think it's 5 mana. Anyway, maybe 4. Anyway, her points are 4. And she has 3 abilities. Her first one is a +1, which puts a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield. So she's pumping the armies up. Her second ability is also a +1. Remember, most of the older cards we see with the second ability is a minus. This one's 2 +1. So her first one is add a creature. The second one is also +1. Target creature gets a +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. So that 1/1, the next turn you use that ability to give it the 3 and flying. It goes from being a 1/1 to a 4/4 flying until end of turn. Now, Elspeth's final ability is -8. You get an emblem with artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands you control are indestructible. So essentially it said, even though you've used up the Planeswalker, if you use it up, you use all 8. That was all the points she had down here. Say you'd only gain 4 more to add onto her 4, and you use that 8 ability, so she has 0. That gets rid of her. She goes to the graveyard. However, she leaves an emblem, which means for the rest of that match, anything you have is indestructible, which is pretty strong. Pretty strong. And let's look at the last one I've kind of pulled out here. Tezzeret the Seeker. He starts out with 4. His first one is +1, untap up to 2 target artifacts. So again, someone who works well with artifact decks. His second ability is -X, which is search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. So you could use that first off, find a 4 mana artifact. That's all of Tezzeret's use, but he's allowed you to pull out that 4 mana artifact. But his final ability, which is -5, artifacts you control become 5/5 artifact creatures until end of turn. Now, here's what's interesting. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you can directly target Planeswalkers, like you target a player. And they have these abilities, they have these points, which essentially works as life. Because the actual player starts with 20. The Planeswalkers, this counts as their life. So Tezzeret starts with 4. And if he's hit by something with 4 damage and there's nothing to block, he's done. That's it. If he's hit for 2 damage, it doesn't kill him, but you've got to build him back up. So say he starts with the 4, he's hit for 2 damage, that means he drops to 2. His first ability will continue to allow you to keep building him up per turn, but it's per turn. And so they can just keep hitting you so that he can't, the Planeswalker can't really put out their great ability. But yeah, they're pretty constant in each deck now. They're not uber cheap to get, although this last one they were, because that was one of the ideas behind the deck, War of the Spark. Which the Spark in Magic the Gathering lore is what allows Planeswalkers to travel between planes. And one of the oldest and most powerful Planeswalkers there is Nicol Bolas. And he was originally part of what was known as the 5 Elder Dragons. There was Nicol Bolas, Arcade Sabbath, Victus Osmati, Palladia Mors, and Chromium. Now, Nicol Bolas was the dark Elder Dragon legend, and he was the only one that lived. The rest of them kind of died off. There's actually a fairly decent story on Magic the Gathering lore, but for now, that's kind of what you need to know about Planeswalkers, and a little bit about foil. Which all foil is that shiny effect. But that's this this lesson's information on foil and Planeswalkers. I know it's kind of spread out, but I wanted to give you an example of what it was like to have each one. But usually there's for each set there's like maybe 3, maybe 4 in a set until, like I said, this War of the Spark. It'll probably go back to the 3 or 4 rule for per set. But that's how Planeswalkers function in the game. Next time we'll kind of talk about instants, sorceries, and a card that's no longer printed, interrupts. We'll talk about those 3 kind of spells. But that's all for now. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. I'll see you all again in the next video. But until then, later.